Live. We've already started yakking.
Yeah, we have.
So I was just saying, I'm going to introduce myself in case there's we've got some people coming. It's exciting. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Vicki Lesley. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I've sort of somewhat by accident, I ended up spending, well, this year it is 20 years, the last 2 decades, basically kind of immersing myself in nuclear issues, nuclear weapons to start with, and then nuclear power. And the sort of culmination of that was my debut feature documentary, which is, I should plug, it's on streaming on Netflix and Disney Plus, bizarrely. It's called The Atom, A Love Affair.
Seems incongruous, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the sort of turbulent, stormy history of nuclear energy and our kind of love-hate relationship with it. And I've got a new...
It's brilliant. I've seen it. It's brilliant.
Oh, thank you. And I got a new short that I'm working on, which is also very germane to what we'll be talking about today. But the real reason that we're here, and I'm so thrilled and honoured, really, to be here talking with Eleanor, because yesterday...
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
It's out.
In the sunlight, you can fully see this amazing cover. And yes, I was right. I've got a page marked if we get around to it. I've marked down loads of bits that I liked.
Oh, good. Okay, that's good.
So yeah, so we said we'll go a bit free range, but I'm not going to ask you like where did you get your idea from?
Yeah, thank God. No, I'll tell you
that sort of, well, I kind of came to nuclear just in a way by accident and didn't actually really have any family, like any personal lineage. Although I did discover that my mum-in-law was at Greenham. Although obviously I only known her in more recent years, but I know that you have got in your family sort of lineage,
kind of
sort of past. So maybe that might be a place to start with talking about your mum, or however you want to talk about.
Yeah, well, amazingly,
Greenham,
because I did mention it to you. Did I text you? I can't remember, but yesterday on the
you did. You did a note about it.
So here it is.
Incredible. You got it. You picked it up. Incredible.
So everybody listening, basically I was on the tube, I was coming back from I don't know where, I sat down, and on the floor, splayed on the floor, was this with a woman's foot over it, and all I could see was that headline, and I was like, what the fuck? So I said, do you mind if I read it? I bent down, picked it up, and then started reading it. Yeah, and it was published in 1962, Where to, from Aldermaston. So the connection, for me, this is how it was so significant, was because in the very first CND march to Aldermaston, which is it's where they do the research. It's like the nuclear bomb research, isn't it, basically, Vicky, in England?
Yeah.
So the very first place that CND decided to march to in 1958, the Easter weekend, was Aldermaston. And I think it was the only march they did from Trafalgar Square to Aldermaston. In marches after that, they went the other way around, Aldermaston, Trafalgar Square. But the one in 1958, they marched, and they ended
up at the gates of Aldermaston on Easter Monday, which I only know because I was just saying I went to Aldermaston. I couldn't remember when it was. It was for the 50th anniversary of that first march, we did a surround the base on Easter Monday 2008. And I'd seen some kind of comments on the Facebook thing about it from 2008, kind of scoffing, like, what's the point of being there? It's a bank holiday, no one will be there. And it was a CND post, and CND had replied and said, it's not about that. We're marking, it's 50 years since this march. And actually they got there, there was no one there that day either, but that's that's not the point. It was about, it's a symbolic moment and a coming together, and it was that was the beginning of the anti-nuclear movement. It was really wasn't it, in this country?
Yeah, and I think I often get asked what's the point of protest, because of Fallout and the book and everything, and it's about keeping your voice alive and being able to
being with other people.
So what happened for the first march, the original 1958? The reason why it's significant to me is that my mum was on that march. And they began. Have you seen the Leslie Addison film?
Yes, you sent. It was one of the very first things you sent me.
I can't.
What that must be like for you. Explain the significance of.
Okay, so they all met in Trafalgar Square. There probably only about 500 people met in Trafalgar Square, and there were speeches and all the rest of it. And then off they set, and they walked.
That's still a large number, though. You imagine 500 people marching. The roads en masse.
Yeah, exactly. First CND, it was a big deal. The next day it started to rain, and then the numbers were kind of dwindling. And then they just managed to kind of build a sort of buzz in 1958. So they were just building word of mouth. I think it got on the radio, it got on the newspapers. And by the time they marched into Aldermaston, they were 5,000.
Incredible. Amazing.
5,000 people. And the last scene of this Leslie Anderson film is my mother's face. And she says she remembers going to the cinema to watch the news in 1958. Knew she'd obviously been on the march, amazing, thought she'd go and see any news on it. And then suddenly her face appeared on this, like, and so she always used to tell us that story. And I didn't really mean anything to me at the time. And then when she died last year, but I started researching for a novel. It's called The Moderns, and we'll be submitting it, and it's ready to go. So I'm looking forward to that. So when I started researching The Moderns and writing it, obviously I went to her and we talked a lot. And so that was the idea for that. It's The Moderns is a novel of the breakdown of a marriage against the backdrop of the first CND march to Aldermaston. So that began the kind of interest. And then I was talking to my agent about a kind of, like a sort of, where am I going next? And it really occurred to me that actually, if I go for each decade and I think about the really big, significant political event that really I'm fascinated by that. So I've got 1958. So the 60s and 70s, I won't tell you what they are, but I'm working on them. But I got to the 1980s and I thought Greenham, obviously. So I wrote, so I'm writing them out of order. So I wrote.
It's so interesting that you say obviously, because I would probably say the same thing. But one of the things that I've learned, both in reading some of your interviews you've been doing about Fallout, but also from, in fact, I think you mentioned it in
they
were on the BBC, weren't you? Which is on the Empress page. So if you want to go and hear Eleanor on the BBC, that's linked on there.
In my pajamas, can I say? It was 10 o'clock at night.
Was it? Fantastic. And you mentioned this new short documentary, which I may even have I've got the postcard for it because I saw it a few weeks ago.
So Gentle Angry Women.
Angry Women.
Yeah.
And that is, so Greenham also started with a march. There were some women in Wales who marched down to the Greenham
from Glamorgan.
Yeah. And this film follows some young, like in their early 20s, young activists of now, Extinction Rebellion and animal rights and the sort of, I don't know, the modern versions in some ways of Greenham. And interestingly, strikingly, there isn't really a modern, but CND obviously still exists, but young people are not really, which is something to talk about, but they're not campaigning about nuclear anything. But in this film, these three of these young activists, they recreated that march. So it was the 40th anniversary of Greenham, 2 or 3 years ago. And so in that film, you're getting to see the younger generation, sort of like the passing of the mantle. But one of the things I found sort of profoundly shocking, and I just didn't know, was that Greenham has kind of fallen off of the radar.
Or was it pushed?
Or has been pushed, yeah. Because,
do you know what I mean? Women?
But I was a kid been thinking about this. I was like, well, I don't ever remember like learning about Greenham. It was just a thing it was like, Thatcher, it was the Cold War, Thatcher, Reagan, Gorbachev, Greenham. These were just like things that were on the news that were just like in the ether.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, when did that go away? I mean, I guess probably partly it went away after the base went away, but it's really shocking. And it was a huge, I think it was the biggest all women protest after the suffragettes. And it lasted for nearly 20 years. It was just massive. And how has that just kind of gone away? So, I mean, it's incredible that you've written this novel. And it really, I wasn't at Greenham, but I have been at other, I've never lived in a peace camp, but I've spent some time, I went to Faslane. I did all my sort of activism. It's this sort of idea of this like female lineage of activism through the decades is quite, that kind of gives me a bit of a chill thinking about my sort of place in that. But sort of 20 years ago, it was really around the time that the decision to replace Trident was happening in like 2007.
Yeah,
that's when I was doing a lot of sort of nuclear weapons stuff. And I went to Faslane up in Scotland, and I went to the surround the base at Aldermaston, and just that sense of the passage of time. And now here we are. I mean, I think we're the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, where I believe I'm right in saying we are like now is with the closest to midnight we've ever been. If you know their doomsday clock, the nuclear threat is really high right now, and probably only getting higher with everything that's going on in the Middle East and Putin, and yet it's not in the culture and in the discussion in anything like it was in the 80s. The bomb, nuclear issues. And so, I mean, it's wonderful that I sort of hope your book is in the vanguard, maybe of.
I hope so.
Cultural because culture is you know, obviously we both agree, but it's an amazing way, isn't it, to actually to get people, to get them to engage. I mean, your characters in this novel, you just said they're like real people to you, but they are. They live the page. Do you want to tell us? Give us. I don't know. I'm really worried about spoiling anything, but do you want to give us Tracy about who's? You know.
Well, before I do that, though, I just want to loop back to something you said about young people and Greenham dropping off the radar. And I think, I don't know if Esme Campbell is on listening in, but she interviewed me for Guildford Dragon recently. She was the very first person, let alone one person under 30 to have heard of Greenham. I'm going to say that again, everyone. She was the first person I've met under the age of 30 to have heard of it. Unbelievable. And she said her dad, who's kind of my age, she said he understands, you know, he was saying to her, like, the nuclear threat was so vibrant when he was a kid, like it was to me. We weren't that far away from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and certainly our.
Well, I think it's about the same difference, isn't it? Distance back.
It is
about the same years on from Hiroshima as we are now from Greenham.
Exactly, and it's so that tremor in the air that we all grew up with, which was very real, it just doesn't exist for the younger people now. There's a different. Well, the tremor in the air for them, it's the same level of anxiety, but it's not ascribed to nuclear war. And it does seem, I mean, certainly it's ascribed to the climate crisis, even though, you know, that has been firmly pushed off the front page.
Unfortunately.
You know, well, and, you know, quite, consciously, I think it's probably fair to say. So I think, but it does, you know, the threat certainly hasn't gone away. The button is still there. We are still globally spending trillions on weaponry that will annihilate.
We're in a much more unstable world. I mean, in the Cold War, there was, you know, mutually assured destruction. It's kind of mad.
Well, I read now
in all senses, but you know, there was maybe some kind of balance between those two superpowers. Now it just feels like we're in this kind of Wild West free for all, and you know, who knows what might happen.
Well, what remains, though, because I do take a really fantastically optimistic outlook always, because I do, in terms of hope, because or wise hope, not kind of sort of mad hope, you know what I mean, like ignorant hope, but just understanding that human nature and our desire to live symbiotically and carefully around each other is just as strong as it always was.
Yeah.
And will never dissipate. And we have dealt with insane tyrants before.
Yes. Yeah.
And we are, you know, the thing I think that kind of exhausts me is the structures which still continue to put insane tyrants at the top of the power tree. That is the structure that I look at us as a species and think, well, why are we still upholding these? Because it is structures that put them there. They haven't just dropped out of a tree. We've put them there. So that's the bit that I'm always fascinated by. But Greenham is an incredibly brilliant example of what happened, what the power of what we can do, and what happens when we organise around an idea and not an ideology. And that's the thing that really, really strikes me about Greenham, that it wasn't an ideology. There wasn't such a thing as right speech and right look and right behaviour and right action. It was just an idea. Get rid of the bombs and give us back our land. Like, super simple. And as far as my research has taken me, no one was ever thrown out of Greenham for not agreeing on every single political point that anyone. There was massive disagreement at Greenham amongst the population there. There was huge, as far as my research has taken me.
It never tanked Greenham.
It never tanked. It almost did. It almost did. There was an episode called The Split, and I intentionally finished the novel before The Split because it was very significant, and I would really love somebody to write that novel. So if anyone wants to,
I've actually got another book. This is a non-fiction book that I've. This is called Righteous Anger. This is by who's going to hopefully be part of my new short film. But this is from One Woman's Action for Peace, 83 to 93. She goes a lot of detail
into
about
it. Yeah, I mean, it was fascinating. And again, that was, I just didn't want to touch it because that's the thing with writing Fallout. there were so many different ways I could have gone.
Yeah.
For every writer out there, this is 19 years. This is thousands of women. Every single woman's got a story. Every single woman, their stories go from whether they're on the base, what's happening at home, are they arrested, what are their political views, what are their social views, there's a million.
You have got a real kaleidoscope of different women. Obviously there's your one main kind of heroine character, Bridget.
Yeah.
But then around her, there's these sort of like concentric circles of women, young, old, working, not working, mothers, not mothers. That was one of the things about Greenham, wasn't it? It just was a sort of constellation of, and as it grew bigger, I think was listening to you talking to maybe on the BBC that it did start out as activists, maybe people who'd been on the March to Aldermaston or who were already actively involved. There was all kinds of activism going on in the 80s, but yeah, that idea, that thing of the women only, and it was just a space for women to come and sort of say no,
just be humans.
We're here.
Be humans, actually, not be gendered. I think in terms of kind of the diverse spread of Greenham, it's always worth pointing out most women were able-bodied, and I think that's probably
very, quite white as well. Although
and white, it was, what I mean. And I think there's a big, there are conversations that I had a really interesting conversation with Angie Brown, although I wanted to go more into it about equity in protest, because the black women I spoke to who were at Greenham said the reason why it was mostly white, and I think certainly I think maybe mostly middle class, was because white middle class women, at least at Yellowgate, it was definitely middle class, because white middle class women had never felt the boot of the state.
Yeah.
They didn't know the tide was with them. They were just going on in their lives, behaving, not knowing that they were behaving. And Greenham was the first time they went, I don't like this. And then they hit what every other woman has hit.
I really loved, maybe loved is the wrong way to say, but there's, there are some men in the novel, but they're it's mostly women. But one of the characters, she's from this quite, I guess, kind of, she would have considered herself to be in quite a sort of very equitable marriage. They were both quite political. They met as students.
Kate and Simon.
Yeah, basically, yeah. But then her husband, actually, when the chips are down, it turns out he's he's got very traditional ideas, and he's not into her actually going off and expressing herself and being at Greenham, because it means he's got to be home and making the dinner for the kids. And, I thought it was really, and that is very, it's not that this has gone away now, but that was very 1980s, wasn't it? Remembering how we have come a long way in some ways, and we still have a long way further to go. But
I think he's not
of the gender sort of roles in the 80s that the Greenham women were partly.
Yeah, I think it was. Anyone who didn't live through it, the 80s. They were liberated only in name. It was like, be a feminist, but only up to a point.
Yeah,
was basically the 80s, and that's
be a feminist like Maggie is a feminist.
Well, I think there's a line in the book where one woman says to another, she really fucked you, didn't she? Because everybody always pulls out what about Maggie Thatcher? But Maggie was playing a man's game, or rather playing the patriarchal structural game. And she played it very well. And, 80s women, the idea that you could have it all, it was actually, you had to be it all. You can have the shoulder pads, but don't for a minute think that you can not be in the kitchen cooking at the end of the day. You can forget it.
Yeah.
But to go back to the cast of Fallout, what I tried to do, so there's Bridget, for those who I hope will read it, haven't read it yet. Bridget is our hero. She's 15 years old. She does not give a shit about politics, not interested. She's from Surbiton. She thinks her mother is embarrassing. Her father is weird. Her father is obsessed with building a fallout shelter in the house. The whole thing is just like one big yawn, massive eye roll. But she goes off to school, and her art teacher, Miss Jenkins, convinces her, doesn't have to try very hard, to come to this action called Embrace the Base. So she lies to her parents about where she's going and goes off to Greenham and turns up at Embrace the Base, which was the first big action at Greenham, December 12th.
Although she doesn't go because she's at all interested really in the news.
Couldn't care less. Has hardly heard of, the only reason she's heard of the atom bomb is that her dad is obsessed with building a fallout shelter, but she's not at all interested. But when she sees the fence and she sees the women, her eyes are opened. And the very first person she meets, I think, is Cerise, who's a Spanish wild punk anarchist who's, I think her grandparents were murdered by Franco. So she begins Bridget's politicization, her political sort of education. And what I try to do with the characters, so the women that surround Bridget and kind of educate her, and they're the women that she eventually, goes through the fence with and all the rest of it. I needed them to kind of represent the various women at Greenham, but also I didn't want them to be just generic middle-class white woman, generic old granny, So I had to kind of carve a line, so find their humanity. Each one of them, Maureen is in her, doesn't really say, but she's probably sort of she's a young granny. She's probably in her 70s. And then Dawn is one of the few black women at Greenham, and taken with permission from a real Greenham woman called Susay, who was one of the first.
I did wonder. I wondered if...
Yeah. Susay is an icon. She's a hero. I mean, every bit of research and interview I've done, Sue comes up somewhere. It was Sue who was responsible for putting the standpipe at Maingate, getting it there. Yeah, she knew how to argue with the council and get us, which meant that they could have residency, which meant they could get water and they could get all the rest of it, So she's an absolute hero. It was a balancing act really to kind of the surrounding cast to be real people, but also to represent the kind of variation at Greenham. And I know when I finished writing Fallout, at least, I was pretty much there on the drafts. I remember going out one day and I was walking down my local town. I was living in Godalming then, down the high street. And I looked at everyone I saw differently. There was no the granny wheeling her trolley along. She could have been a Greenham woman.
Yeah.
The mum at the bus stop, Greenham woman. Everybody. And even I, who consider myself I know women, I'm a feminist. Even I realised that there was still a bedrock of I know what an activist looks like.
Yeah.
And I don't know what an activist looks like. You and me and the granny at the bus stop. That's what activists look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you did you speak directly to a lot of Greenham women before?
Yeah, I did.
Did you ever go to Greenham yourself?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I went on the Queen's funeral day because I knew the road would be empty.
Oh no, I meant back in the 80s.
Oh, back in the day? No, God, no. I mean, I was 11 in 82.
Right.
80.
So you're a little bit too young. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, it went on for 19 years.
And
that's the other thing. You said earlier, you're not sure when it dropped off the radar. I think it dropped off the radar in the 90s because
it closed, didn't it? Because once the treaty was passed and the cruise missiles, have we explained about what was at Greenham?
Well, no. So mutually assured destruction was the idea that Reagan and Thatcher, a brilliant idea that they came up with. So they would house cruise missiles at an RAF base in Berkshire, RAF Greenham Common, and they would point them at Moscow. What could possibly go wrong? Greenham women turned up and protested it, and eventually in 1992,
I think,
Gorbachev and Reagan signed the intermediary nuclear. What's the F stand for? Can never remember.
Test ban, intermediate test ban.
Treaty, which meant that they then agreed that, and they cited Greenham women as an inspiration, that they would then remove the cruise. But of course, removing the cruise then took years. So I don't think the missiles were removed until about 95, 96. And then the fence didn't come down till 2000.
Yeah.
So the final and the memorial was put up for the Greenham woman who was killed on site. So the final end of Greenham was 2000. So there's no reason why I couldn't have gone there when I left home. I finished my, I don't know, in 87, I was 16. I could have gone, but it had dropped off the news.
Yeah.
Then. It was really, I remember the
other
headlines.
things were coming in.
Other things were going on.
There's so many areas of life that we need to shout about. And, the early 90s, there was a lot of other sort of protesting.
Well, yeah, but I'm for me it's Occam's razor. There's one very simple, obvious explanation why it not only dropped off the radar, but was never included in women's history, political history, the history of British protest, because it was women only. And I'm going to stand by that unless someone else can prove.
I think you're completely right. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was absolutely the biggest act of, defiant courage.
Yeah.
Of the, what can I say, of the 20th century? I mean, certainly, like, since the suffragettes.
Since the
And
suffragettes,
it's
100%.
19 years, and yet it's not taught in. There's no Greenham Day at primary school where everyone comes in covered in mud, holding, bolt cutters. But you bet your life there's a suffragettes day.
Well, people don't. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'm not completely sure that I think there's a lot of people in the UK who don't even really know that we've got nuclear weapons, or that if they do, they certainly don't know anything really about them, or
no,
they might have heard of the word Trident if they kind of watch the news a lot, but
yeah,
I don't know. I just think that the knowledge of nuclear weapons altogether and of Britain's sort of current and past sort of entanglements isn't there, and that's not by accident, is it?
I don't think it's by accident. Of course, there's a muddle with nuclear power.
Yeah,
and so between those two things, and I really waver around the nuclear power issue, because, of course, when it works well, it works incredibly well. But when it goes wrong, well, apart from the enormous amount of waste,
but also the cost.
And the cost in building the thing in the first place.
Well, the cost of building it, the whole cost, the whole
yeah. Right. But, I'll certainly sit down and listen to argument around it, and I'd certainly be part of a discussion around it. And I don't think it's a clear black and white good, but I just don't think, for my money,
there's a discussion to be had in a way that
totally a discussion to be
had about weapons, really.
I mean, I really, I think the discussion is, they're a deterrent.
The argument that can be, I think, that can really be made in any good sense is that, because we've got them, now we have to have them. You look at that, you hear this said a lot about, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons after the fall of the Soviet Union. And wouldn't it be so much better for them? Well, it's counterfactual, but, would Putin have done some of the things he's done if they still had their own independent nuclear deterrent? But I mean, where does that end?
Where does that end? And actually, if you micro it and say, if you're carrying a knife, you are much more likely to be stabbed.
Yes, absolutely.
That's just a fact. And if you've got a gun, you're more likely to get shot. So if you are storing nuclear weapons, you are more likely to be hit by.
I don't think to me, it's not at all controversial to say that the Great Britain makes itself much more of a target by being a nuclear weapons state. I don't think other comparable size sort of smaller nations. This is part of the problem, isn't it?
Insane.
Going back to other things we've talked about in the past about empire, but we still have this conception of ourselves in this country of being a very big, globally important nation, and the nukes are totally part of that. They buy us that seat at the.
Yeah, I mean, I think we really have to have a word with ourselves. Don't we? Do you know what I mean? Because there's a brilliant, The Rest is History is doing a great piece on Thatcher, the early Thatcher years, the 1970s. And they were talking about the kind of mood in Parliament at the time when she came in. It was like, the empire is folded, colonies have decided they want freedom and all this. Now, who are we? What's our big... And at that moment, we could have said, do you know what we're going to do? We're going to really focus on looking after each other, making sure everybody, being a leading light in this is how we live together well, and we educate well, and everyone's got a home, and everyone, we could easily have done that. I mean, our arts, I was going to say our arts department, the arts department of the UK is second to none.
True, isn't it?
We are brilliant.
That is what we're known for around the world. It's our music, is our
comedy,
our literature,
and
our comedy. All of that.
And if we invested in that and in each other, if you're dead set on needing to be on a leading light, fine, be a leading light on that. But this very idea that we still have to sort of
our health service, that's one of the.
Well, I mean, that was the that was one
the
of
idea of the NHS. Again, there's these, like you say, there are these kind of like sliding door moments where we could have.
Yeah, we could have. And Nye Bevan, I don't know did you see the play? Nye?
No, I definitely
love. God, I cried. I mean, it was because it was a moment in time.
Yeah.
When he said, "Look, we can do this incredible thing," and he did it.
Yeah.
But I mean, actually, again, this was a conversation I had with Angie Brown, this idea, and actually it comes up in John Proctor as the villain, which I just read to see, which is this idea that name is more important than body. The fiction of name is more important than the facts of body. So the fiction of the name of the UK, this big, is more important than the actual body.
Because actually, we're a small island nation.
We're a funny little kooky island,
edge of Europe.
Yeah, we are.
We're just sort of hanging off the edge.
Yeah, with a great diverse culture,
huge diverse
culture,
so
much to give. We could lead the light in how to live together peacefully. I mean, is that so fucking revolutionary?
What do other people come to the UK for? They love that history and that the melding together over centuries that's produced sort of modern Britain. But it's like, I don't know, but sort of the powers that be they don't see that in the same way.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they don't, and I think there's a heeding towards known structures, even though we know for a fact they do not work. I mean, I know I could talk about Angie Brown, but we had such a fascinating conversation about equity, and one of the things that she brought up, I've thought about this a lot. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if just a play on thought, if the politicians of today sat in a room and said, let's just imagine that none of us want equity. Let's just imagine we don't want it.
Yeah.
What would life look like? And you know what it would look like?
How?
Exactly what we've fucking got.
Yeah.
And the truth of it is that individually, there are really, really good people trying to do their best, but structurally, we have a system that doesn't want it.
Yeah.
It doesn't fucking want it. So until we're prepared to admit that we are adhering to a structure that doesn't want equity, it doesn't matter how many good fucking bits you set up, you're never going to do it. And that's the bit of just having a little bit of humility and saying, let's just imagine that we don't want it.
Well, humility is something that is sort of sadly lacking, isn't it? Unfortunately,
because we cling to name. We cling to name, and it's a weird thing because you have it for a flash.
World War, aren't we, in this country? Like, are we gonna sort of get over that and move on? And I'm sure that the bomb is part of that. It came out. Didn't get it until after the Second World War, but I think in the sort of story, the bomb ended the Second World War, and so that so we need it. It's this, I don't know, it's kind of, I saw a great play, well, I don't know if you'd call it a play, a sort of one-man show 2 or 3 years ago, and it was about the negotiations for the TPNW, the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which, for people who don't know, it's a UN treaty which we have not signed up to, and nor have any of the nuclear weapons states. But it's not every other nation on earth, but a majority of the other non-nuclear weapon states have all signed up to what sounds like quite a sensible idea to say, let's get rid of the nuclear weapons in the world. That will make the whole world safer.
Yeah.
But we don't even sort of recognize, really kind of acknowledge this treaty, never mind have ratified it. But this sort of show was, I suppose, in a way similar with your novel, kind of, personified. It had some of the negotiators and that sort of doubling of them as human beings who they were having coffee in the breaks and, talking to their rivals on the other side, but also embodying the sort of position of the, so they, there was they had America, the UK, I think they had a UK because it was a British show, but, some Europe, non-major sort of, comparably large European nations as us, but who don't have nuclear weapons, who obviously see the whole thing in quite a different way than we do. But yeah, that's sort of I think humility is all tied up in it, isn't it? It's this sort of idea, and maybe that's partly why, to go back to Greenham, why Greenham has been sort of quietly shuffled out of the sort of official narrative, is because it doesn't fit with that narrative.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's completely critiquing that narrative. It's actually saying, I suppose it's almost like an emperor's new clothes, isn't it? The women were there kind of saying, we see you, we see this.
We exactly.
A load of crap, we don't want it.
Yeah, they were pointing out the obvious. I mean, that was one of the things, like one of the reasons why they got their bolt cutters and they cut through that fence every single night was to prove how poorly defended
it was to get in there. Yeah.
And they were like, we wish no harm. Imagine if we wished harm, but it just didn't compute. I think the other aspect of it as well, in terms of those who were busy building military arsenals, is this idea that someone out there is out to get me. And again, that's a thought form, and the truth of it is, and it's certainly proved, when there are global disasters, whether they're man-made or natural, when those things happen, it's not like disaster movies with everybody ransacking each other's houses.
No,
people come together.
The pandemic, all the mutual support groups that
exactly. That's what. That's who we are. That is who we are.
We all, as humans, we have all of, we do have, clearly there are less good parts of human nature, and those come out in crimes or wars or conflicts of all kinds. That is part of humanity. It obviously must be, but it's not the only part. And I've always sort of thought, like, I grew up in a non-political family, but if anything, they were Tory voters, sort of working class Tory voters, but not interested in politics. But basically, my family did well in the 80s. My parents were the first generation, and my parents, my aunts and uncles, they all got mortgages and got houses, and whereas my grandparents were renting, and they were all doing really well. And even as a teenager in the 90s, I remember because I went on a scholarship to a private school where we were quite sort of right on, and I met lots of Labour voting, sort of left-wing Guardian reading parents, and that was very confusing for me, because in my house, Labour was this sort of real dirty word. But in that was where I started hearing sort of political conversations in a way that I hadn't heard at home. I've lost my train of thought now. What were we just talking about?
I can't remember it now. You've thrown me, but
sorry.
It's all right. I was thinking about cutting through the fence. Actually, what I was really thinking about as you were talking, because I'm always trying to trace it back, like, I really understand that, and one, I can meet them on the street and I can see them on the news, that there are aggressors out there.
That's right.
No question.
That's what we were talking about, wasn't it? The good and the bad in humanity.
Yeah, and I'd be a fool to say that the world is all everybody's skipping about in a field of roses. I know they're not, but I also am really conscious that those acts of violence that we see on a macro and a micro level are coming from an injured soul.
Yes.
Right? Like, nobody who is, well fed and housed and happy and not dealing with intergenerational trauma, which is what collectively
that's what I was going to say.
We're dealing with.
Our political systems can be set up, it can feel like the political world that we live in is just like, it's like the water we swim in, but it's, as you said before, it's structures. Those structures were created. They weren't always there, even though we don't know a time when they weren't there, because they were always there in our lifetime generally. But those structures can be set up in different ways, and you can set them up in ways that sort of pit people against each other, don't provide all of their basic needs, tolerate like, in the 80s, when the 90s more, when I was going out in London, I grew up in Surbiton, funnily enough.
I don't know why I'm obsessed with Surbiton.
I know.
Surbiton.
Surbiton was where I used to get from. And we'd go up to Waterloo, and you remember the cardboard city. There was so much homelessness, and I think sad. I think that's back. But we tolerate. That went away, didn't it, in the pandemic? Suddenly,
I know. Oh, actually, people. When we have to, that's the thing, and that's
the choices, and we can set things up to
exactly
to bring out the best in us, and to bring out, and that's sort of what Greenham did. It was
exactly
sort of cooperative and bringing out the best in
anarchic.
That huge group of, and anarchic, no leaders,
totally.
right?
No leaders.
There's a great bit in the book, isn't there, when the men turn up and they're like, I want to speak to whoever's in charge. Totally don't
go. Good luck. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think just to return, to my soapbox and the UK and what we could be. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we are 100%. Let's fix it. We are 100% capable of feeding, housing, educating, and providing the kind of therapeutic resources needed to start to really calm the nervous systems and mend the intergenerational trauma that we are all collectively dealing with. There's absolutely no question. We could do that, and we could do it in, I don't know how many generations it would take. What it would take would be the British government saying, do you know what? we're just going to step down from all this fucking global shouting, and we're going to look and see how we can help each other. I mean, wouldn't that be phenomenal? But to do that is to acknowledge and look dead in the eye collective intergenerational trauma, and to do that, you know, means you have to go into the darkened rooms inside of yourself. And I know from my own experience that's a tough call. So, but it's not impossible.
I don't know for sure, but one of the things I always think about politics is the problem is, like, it's the people who go into politics seem to be the sort of like the worst kind of people that you'd want to be the people who go into politics. But obviously it's self-selecting. So some of the greatest people I can think of, and I know, and I think, I'd love, why aren't you running the world? Because they're busy doing other, you know, they're busy doing community grassroots things, or looking after their families, or, you know, that they don't have any ambitions to go in and
it's a shark infested waters.
But I don't know what you do about that. But kind of, it's
I mean, actually, I've got
very damaged often, the people who seek political office.
Well, again, I would say that
that's a huge blanket.
No. I think the system we've set up elevates certain aspects which are products of damage, and I think that's. I mean, we only need to look at Boris Johnson just to drive that home. But having said that, I know quite a few young people in politics now who, I mean, they've got all that idealism, they've got all that vim and vigor, and so you never know. But I mean, I think this, you know, at the very least, we need proportional representation. I think, you know what I mean, and I think we need some sort of power sharing. There's a million things within the basic structures we've got, which I think.
And education needs to change.
That's like,
we don't know. There's so much we don't know, and we're not taught. I mean, Greenham is a huge case in point, isn't it? But there's so much that we are not. That the narrative that we're told at school is. It's not that it's not true, but it's so narrow.
It's narrow. Well, I think. I mean, I would get rid of. I would make it interdisciplinary. Do you know what I mean? Because to still do this, like history, French, geography, maths, it doesn't make any. Nobody's connecting one room with another.
Well, I think I said when I sent my email out about actually, I don't know if it was today, or it might have been about my film thing, but I'm finding myself, maybe it's because I'm reading a lot of stuff about Greenham, and I don't know, because at Greenham there was lots of wool, wasn't there? They kind of wound.
That was a beautiful thing. It was the
idea of webs and networks of getting away from this kind of like constant sort of like linear sort of march of, and sort of siloing everything off, which it's a stereotypical framing, but that perhaps is a more of a kind of masculine energy to do that, whereas maybe the kind of networked interconnection. But wouldn't it be great if education, you know, Greenham itself, the story of Greenham, it's history, it's politics, it's science, it's technology, you know, it's so many, it's geography, the land. I mean, that's something I'm very, so this, quickly to talk about this new film I'm working on. So this book I've said before, it's written by a lady called Julie Howard. She was one of three. They were young; they were in their early 20s. Three women from Greenham. So Greenham became very, you know, it was obviously in Britain, but it was very international.
Yeah, and they went to Moscow.
They were really sort of plugged in with other struggles in other parts of the world. And one of the struggles they had sort of got to know through being at Greenham, and as you say, because they could get post sent there, so they were getting kind of, you know, I suppose it was zines and you know, Xerox things in the 80s. Yeah, exactly. But Julie talks in her book about how she'd become aware of the indigenous struggles in the States. So the Nevada test site, you wouldn't know this from watching Oppenheimer, but you know, that's native, that's Western Shoshone land. And they call themselves the most bombed nation on earth. You know, because all the testing that's gone on over decades. But I didn't know for quite recently. Well, actually, it was the 40th anniversary of Green, and there was a series of webinars. And at one of those webinars, I learned that the UK, we tested Trident in Nevada. I always thought that we'd done all of our testing in Australia and South Pacific, and that was what we did, you know, earlier decades. But Trident, a number of the Trident tests were in America. And so these three women in 1990, they went out to the test site, and they basically hiked to ground zero where this British nuclear weapons test was going to happen, to stop the test. And they had got permission from the Western Shoshone elders. That was very much about being in solidarity, and all of these issues of sort of, there's kind of layers of land issues there, because that's Shoshone land that the Americans have just
invaded,
requisitioned. Yeah, but then it's British weapons, but there's also all kinds of, it's still an issue now. The independent British nuclear deterrent is actually, it's not really independent at all. It relies on the Americans, and we were testing. We were allowed to test. I don't know. I'm still researching it, but like what the kind of agreements were that facilitated Britain to be testing its nuclear weapons there. But I came across this story, and it sort of blew my mind that the courage of these 3 young women just to hike out into the desert and to literally go and stand, because these are underground nuclear tests by this point. So they're just like standing on top of a bomb. And so I've been to so number of those women are still going. There's a monthly peace camp. So I should plug that if any of this has moved you to want to, because these issues are all still live. And in fact, it is very widely believed that American warheads are now back in Britain at RAF Lakenheath. And so, these and Lakenheath is also being used, I think, for sending flights out to Iran at the moment. We need what's the new Greenham, that's going to happen. Yep. But there is a monthly peace camp at Aldermaston. And I've been a couple of times and met some of these women, and we've already had some like really fascinating conversations about just trying to get into all of these issues about, the land and sovereignty, and kind of what does it mean for us in Britain? We're not the British government, but we are British citizens, and in our name, these tests were done on this land, and that land is incredibly contaminated. And actually, we've got also do another plug. I'm going to be taking part in a webinar in May with the principal man of the Western Shoshone tribe, he's going to be doing a presentation on new findings about contamination on the tribal land. And it's
when is it? When's it going to?
13th of May. So I'll send out. Also, we've just, because it happened Ian is it's not very easy to get a hold of, and he suddenly sort of got back in touch. There's this project that's how I came across this whole story and these women. It's called From Greenham to Nevada. And it's a nuclear colonialism kind of research project that initially was it's University of Liverpool and University of York now. And they said that, it's kind of WhatsApp, but I guess he's not, the communications is not that easy. And he sort of got back in touch, and they were like, I think he's got this new research that he wants to share. So we're like, let's just organize something, straight up kind of as soon as we can. So that's going to be happening.
Great. I'll join that.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And
I'll be going, I'll go out to Aldermaston I don't know whether it'll be May or June. I'm not quite sure, but I'm definitely going to go.
Yeah. They're there every month, and it's kind of, it gave me some kind of a feeling for what it must have. When obviously, I say obviously, it's not obvious, but I mean, when I was there was 7 or 8 women there, and they weren't all camping. So I mean, it was teeny tiny.
Yeah.
But just that juxtaposition, really, of your kettle and the fire, because of course, these days there's cars, they got their chargers in there, a little bit of maybe charge your phone up in the car or something, but it's basically your campfire and your kettle and whatever food you bring and your sleeping bag, and then next to that, these huge fences on the other side of the fence. I found it quite even though I'd been to some of those bases a long time ago, it was a while since I'd been there, and just that sort of physical feeling. And you really catch that, I think, in the book, especially through the eyes of Bridget. This kind of physically, these places you never see. Obviously, you're never going to get anywhere close to actually see any of that. Well, I say that they at Greenham they followed them around, didn't they, on the transports?
Yeah, when they did night watch. I mean, what was it called? Yeah, when they went out onto the plains, they did follow them out. Yeah,
but generally, it's all hidden, and this is part of the. It's some of the issue, I suppose. We see those the mushroom clouds, as you've got on the cover there. But it's almost like it's become not depoliticized, but it's sort of, the image is sort of almost maybe become sort of separated from reality in our minds. It's just kind of, I think it's very hard to conceive, isn't it, of actually, it's beyond your conception in a way, what nuclear weapons are and what they do.
What they can do. And I think, when I hear and when I watched in the research, the tests sites, and when I hear about it, because I am as actually everybody is. I am the land, and I am the air, and I am trees, and I am so it.
Oh, by the way,
it breaks my heart. It doesn't even fucking cover it.
I meant to say, I don't know if everybody's aware, it's Earth Day today, so it feels even more appropriate to be having this conversation. But sorry, carry on.
Because she's a living being.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I can't put it any more plainly. And the idea that
and the Earth we've got, we're not going to live on Mars. It's nonsense.
No, we've done that. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
The idea that it doesn't echo through every atom of our beings is, okay, I'll put it this way. Every time you detonate a bomb, it echoes through every atom of our beings. Yeah. So, and then we wonder why we're all so fucked up.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, holy shit, stop bombing. It
actually, you're right. More or less. What is it now? 2026. So we're 81 years now after the bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So there's not many. There obviously will be some people who are older than that, but the vast, vast majority of people now who are alive on planet Earth have only ever lived in a post-bomb world. And that's there. That's literally in the land. It's in the air. That I did a live last year. I've got it to hand. This book I picked up, incredible book I picked up in the charity shop called The Intelligent Woman's Guide to Atomic Radiation.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah, it was from the
favorite title.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing cover art. But you remember, because it was before the tests went underground, and Fallout, as your book is called, was and is. It's, even though we're not testing above ground now, although there was a brief moment, I think it was at the end of last year, when everybody went nuts because Trump had said something that for a moment seemed to suggest that perhaps that America might start doing overground tests again. But I think it was just, he says all kinds of, he says something one minute and something, I don't think he
exactly.
But it seems like that's not happening. But even though it's now decades since the last above ground test, all out in the atmosphere, that's there now. It's kind of,
it's there. Yeah. And I think, perhaps we were being a bit facetious earlier on in the conversation when we said that Hiroshima, ended the war. And I understand the discussion is, of course, we know the war was happening. They dropped those 2 bombs. The war was over. I get that framing of it, but it may have ended this particular thing, but it began something, much more deadly, much more hidden. And I don't know if anybody watching has seen the photographs and read the accounts and understands. Multi-generational trauma doesn't even fucking cover it. And what we did to, like, the very body and soul and atmosphere of our planet. We when you split the atom, you split the whole fucking time and space, man. It just, it fucks with our brains.
It's so essential, isn't it? Yeah. So you can't
to our togetherness, what holds us together.
Yeah.
And it's no wonder, but it's hidden. It's hidden, and then you start seeing, how we have all started behaving towards each other, or continued to. I just, at some point, and I know it's simplistic, but at some point, we just have to stop.
Yeah,
it's like
fear that it will take another actual real world strike. That's my fear, and I don't think people, all we've really got to see is all, as though, just not to diminish it, but is what happened in Japan. And that was, I did quite a lot of stuff for the 80th anniversary last year. I wrote about it and stuff. But Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But those bombs were small by
they were small.
Hydrogen bomb that we have now, and the even just Trident, like they're, if any kind of nuclear strike happens in the world, I know we hear some talking about tactical nuclear strikes, but this is sort of...
It's bollocks. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Don't ever let anyone...
If any...
Don't attach the word tactical.
Happens, if anything happens, it will be on a scale so far beyond what happens in Japan. And I fear that actually that might be what it's going to take to stop it. I mean, I
don't think so. Yeah, I don't...
I hope not.
I don't think so, because I think that the desire for self-preservation generally wins out over the day, and nothing. I think they probably don't want to admit it, but Hiroshima and Nagasaki was so shocking that I think they're like, I don't think they'll do it again. I may be being naive, but I
don't necessarily think that anybody would, even the most sort of unhinged sort of leaders, I'm not really that strongly convinced that they would do it on purpose. But, the more nukes there are in the world, and there are a lot more than there were in 1945, the risk of accidents. There's a great book.
That's true. Yeah.
What's it called? I think it's called Command and Control, Eric Schlosser, about just the near misses, just from kind of accidents and sort of fuck ups in...
Do you remember that thing in Hawaii recently when someone by mistake put their coffee down on the button?
There's an amazing documentary about it.
It's my favourite thing. There's a great
or something, isn't it? They got a text to their iPhone saying weapon incoming.
Yeah. And then there's this wonderful photograph of a sign next to a road after it was over, and it just said, "There is no threat." Like, they just had to. But I don't know if Jim Carrey, his memoir, he wrote that off the back of that, because when he got the message on his phone, he was so shocked.
Hawaii, did he?
He lived in Hawaii. He was so shocked that instead of like doing something, he took a photograph of his own face at that moment when he's reading, "You've got 4 minutes. You've got 4 minutes." Because everybody in Hawaii was like, "You've got 4 minutes on your phone." So he had this photograph of his own face of what he looks like when he thinks
he's about dying in 4 minutes.
Yeah. And he wrote a brilliant book on the back of that. I mean, it is... Yeah, so I know. I mean, you're right. The more there are out there, the more likely accidents happen. There's absolutely no question. So, anybody listening who, in whatever way you feel you can add your name to the "this is madness, stop it now, put it down, put down the gun."
CND, CND is still there.
Yeah, they're still campaigning.
They have, it's quite an aging elderly membership, and it's not a hugely large membership, but they're there. They've been there since that march in 1958, and I mean, there's plenty of other places to support, but if you're looking for someone to give £2 a month to or something, or just to sign up to get emails from them and learn more find out what's happening up at Lake and Heath. I think I think it's RF Fairford. There are a bunch of these British bases that are kind of really American bases, and Greenham was one of them. Yeah. They're they are officially in name, they're RAF bases, but really they're kind of American outposts. And there are a bunch of actions and things going on at some of those bases right now.
And I think as well, any educators listening, start teaching in schools.
You need to get this book into schools.
Well, I don't care if it's my book or somebody else's book, but start getting it into schools. The history of atomic war, what it really does, so it isn't just some sort of thought form, it's a real thing. And the history of
a video game,
exactly, because then kids growing up will be like, holy shit, you mean you've got these things which will annihilate for thousands and poison for thousands of years? What are you thinking? Because that kind of thing does change. And I mean, I'm a storyteller, but I really, the power of storytelling, that does, it's because it changes people from the inside when you read stories.
Something I don't know when it will be coming out, and I have sort of slightly conflicted feelings about it, but the Netflix series Adolescence, was that last year?
Yeah.
The team who made Adolescence are doing a remake of Threads, the 1980s. Do you know Threads?
No.
It was a TV movie. It's the worst thing you'll ever watch, really. It was made by Mick Jackson, who went on to make like The Bodyguard, and he's a British director, but he went on to become big in Hollywood. But he made this. It was a TV movie. It was shown in 1984. It's called Threads, and it basically follows. It follows a escalation of war in Iran and the beginning of Threads. Sort of last week, whatever. suddenly it feels like we're living in the beginning of Threads, but it's set in Sheffield, and about halfway through the film, the bomb drops on Sheffield, and it's just following couple of ordinary families. It's very sort of...
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad they... see, that's what we need. Remake that. Really look. I mean, do you remember Where the Wind Blows?
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to scare your kids, but Jesus, it's the Raymond Briggs.
Also, Barefoot Gen. I think when I send the replay out, I'll stick a bunch of notes in. Barefoot Gen is not very well known, I don't think, outside of Japan, but it's a manga. Well, it started as a manga series that went on for years. And it was written by Hibakusha. He was 6 when Hiroshima happened, and he lost... I think one of his parents, a couple of his siblings, like many members of his family. And then in the 60s, I think his mother survived. And then she survived for some time, but then she then got cancer and died in the 60s from the fallout. And sort of after she had died, and I think that was a lot of, I suppose, a certain amount of time has passed. There was a new younger generation of Japanese people who were sort of looking back at what had happened. And he published this manga, and then it was turned into an anime film in the mid 80s. And I wrote an essay about that for my film club last year, and I'm going to be re-releasing all of those. Like they were paid. I've decided to re-release them. But Barefoot Gen, it looks like the animation style. It looks like sort of He-Man or something. It's that very like 80s kids style of animation, but it is so brutal. It's so brutal. I mean, it's a way of, you were saying, to get young people to viscerally understand like what these bombs do. The scene, I think I can't remember, maybe 10 minutes. It's quite an extended scene, but actually when the bomb drops in Barefoot Gen is, once seen, never forgotten. But they're really, really tough to watch. But it's real. It's the world that we're actually living in. So I think we have to look it in the eye. And
and it's a realistic prospect that we could get rid of our nuclear arsenal on the UK soil. We could do that, and we can lobby for that, and that's a reachable target. So, exactly. We can all. So
yes, let's end on that optimistic note.
Yeah.
The Greenham women got rid of those cruise missiles, and so
they got rid of those cruise missiles. They did through non-violent direct action.
Yeah,
really important.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we've gone on for just over an hour, I think, haven't we? I'm sure we could go for another full hour.
So good.
We better not. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Take questions. I haven't really been looking at the chat, have you?
There's been bits of lovelies popping up. Thanks everyone for coming. And I love you all.
Yeah, we will. And just again,
and thanks for championing the book. Yes, it's out.
So, honestly, I read it in 2 days. It's fascinating about all the reasons that we've just been talking about, but also just as a story, brilliant characters. Yeah, and there's a lot of other stuff beyond. We've talked about all the nuclear stuff, but I mean, it's about a lot of other things as well, isn't it? It's about sort of family secrets and identity and all kinds of other good stuff. So please go and buy Eleanor's book and read it.
Oh, thanks.
Wonderful.
Vicki.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
And I'll maybe see you for the Western Shoshone webinar.
Oh, yes, I'll be there. Definitely. I'll look out for the invites.
All right.
Brilliant.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.